The moment she shouted, "That thing is illegal," I knew my quiet morning was over. I was just rolling down the sidewalk in my electric wheelchair, coffee still warm in my hand, sun barely up, when this woman stormed out like I'd just committed a felony in broad daylight. No warning, no hello. Just rage, finger pointing. Phone already in her hand, and before I could even ask what her problem was, she said the words that changed everything. "I'm calling the police. You're not allowed to use that here." Now let me rewind for a second, because this wasn't some random street. This was my own neighborhood. A calm suburban place with trimmed lawns, quiet mornings, and an HOA that thought it owned people, not just property. I'd moved here a few months earlier after a long recovery. The wheelchair wasn't a toy. It wasn't a stunt, it was how I got around. Doctor prescribed, fully legal, fully registered, and absolutely none of her business. But she didn't care. She never does. These types never do. If you've been around HOA drama long enough, you already know the look. Tight smile, wild eyes, that confidence that comes from thinking rules only apply to other people. This is the kind of story we tell all the time on Karen Stories Daily. And trust me, this one escalates fast. She blocked the sidewalk with her body, arms crossed, like she was the law itself. I tried to keep my voice calm. I said, "Ma'am, I live here. I'm just going to the mailbox." That's when she laughed. Not a normal laugh. A smug one. "Not in that thing, you're not. Motorized vehicles aren't allowed. It's in the HOA rules." I honestly thought she was joking. I asked her if she really believed a wheelchair was a vehicle. That's when she snapped back, loud enough for half the street to hear. "It has a motor. That makes it illegal, and I'm calling the cops right now." She turned her phone toward me like it was a weapon. Dialing, smiling, already picturing me in handcuffs. And right there, in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't about safety. This was about control. Before we go any further, real quick, if you enjoy true HOA and Karen stories where entitled people finally meet reality, make sure you hit like and subscribe. It helps the channel a ton. And you won't miss the next story here on Karen Stories Daily. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this one ends. She stayed on the line with dispatch, pacing back and forth, telling them there was a man operating illegal machinery and that I was refusing to comply. I wasn't refusing anything, I was just sitting there, literally, in a wheelchair, on a sidewalk. Neighbors started peeking through blinds. One guy across the street shook his head and went back inside like he already knew where this was going. Another woman tried to step in and said, "That's a wheelchair." Karen spun on her so fast, you'd think she'd been waiting for the chance. "I know what a wheelchair is. And I know the rules." That's when I pulled out my phone too, not to call anyone, just to start recording. Experience has taught me that when someone starts screaming about rules, facts are about to matter. She noticed the camera and got even louder. "Don't record me. That's illegal too." Everything was illegal to her. My chair, my presence, my phone, my existence. About 5 minutes later, I heard the sirens and the smile on her face. I'll never forget it. She stood taller, smoothed her hair, like she was about to be proven right in front of the whole neighborhood. 2 police cars pulled up. Officers stepped out. Calm, professional. One of them walked over to me first and asked if I was okay. Before I could answer, Karen rushed over and started talking over everyone. "He's using an illegal electric vehicle in an HOA community. He's disturbing the peace. I want him arrested." The officer looked at my wheelchair, then at me, then back at her, and asked a very simple question. "Ma'am, are you talking about a mobility device?" She nodded aggressively. "Yes, exactly. Those aren't allowed." The officer took a breath, and I could already tell this was not going the way she thought it would. He asked me if the chair was prescribed. I said yes. He asked if I lived here. I said yes. He asked if I was threatening anyone or damaging property. I said no. Then he turned back to her and said, "Ma'am, electric wheelchairs are protected under federal law. They are not vehicles. He is allowed to use it." Her face dropped. just for a second. Then she exploded. That's not true. The HOA rules override that, and that's where things really started to unravel for her. Because the officer shook his head and said no they don't. At this point half the street was watching, phones out. Whispers everywhere. Karen tried to argue. She demanded the HOA president be called. She demanded the officers do their job. She even pointed at me and said he's faking it. That was the moment the second officer stepped in. His tone changed, firmer. Ma'am, do you understand that false police reports are a crime? Silence. She looked around, realizing the crowd wasn't on her side, realizing this wasn't a win. But she wasn't done yet. Not even close. Because what she did next forced the police to stay and turned this from embarrassing into serious. And that's where I'll pause right here. She didn't back down after the police left. Not even close. If anything, that encounter lit a fire under her. By the next morning, my email inbox was already full. 3 messages from the HOA, all marked urgent, all referencing my unauthorized use of a motorized device. That's when I realized she hadn't just complained to the police. She'd gone straight to the HOA board and told them her version of the story. And judging by the wording, she told it loudly and repeatedly. The first email said I was in violation of community rules. The second warned of fines. The third said continued violation could lead to legal action. No one had asked me for my side. No one had bothered to check the law. They just assumed Karen knew what she was talking about. That's how it always starts. One loud person, one confident lie. And suddenly everyone else panics. I rolled over to the HOA office later that afternoon. Slowly, calmly. I wanted this on record. The office was empty except for the property manager, who looked uncomfortable the moment she saw me. She wouldn't make eye contact. She just slid a printed copy of the rules across the desk and tapped a highlighted line about motorized conveyances. I asked her if she knew what the ADA was. She blinked. I asked her if the HOA had a lawyer review these emails before sending them. She said she didn't know. I asked her if she understood that threatening fines for using a medical mobility device was a federal issue. That's when her posture changed. Not defensive, nervous. I explained everything. Doctor's prescription, federal protection, the police report from that morning. I even offered to email her the statute. She nodded, said she'd pass it along and asked me to leave. Not rudely. Just quickly, like she wanted the conversation over before it got worse. It didn't help. 2 days later, a notice was taped to my door. Formal, official. It said I had 72 hours to cease operation of my wheelchair in common areas or face daily fines. Karen's signature wasn't on it, but I didn't need to see it to know she was behind it. This wasn't ignorance anymore. This was deliberate. So I did what she didn't expect. I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer, an ADA compliance attorney who specialized in housing discrimination. I forwarded every email, every notice, the police report, even the video I'd recorded of her yelling on the sidewalk. The lawyer didn't hesitate. He said they messed up. Badly. He explained that HOAs cannot override federal disability law, not with bylaws, not with votes, not with attitude, and threatening fines or restricting access because of a mobility device. That opens the door to serious consequences, fines for them, not me. That afternoon, a certified letter went out to the HOA board. It was calm, professional, and devastating. It cited specific federal statutes, outlined the violations, and demanded immediate cessation of harassment. It also requested written confirmation that no further action would be taken against me. The letter ended with one sentence that I'm pretty sure ruined Karen's week. Failure to comply may result in legal action, damages, and attorney's fees. The reaction was almost instant. Emails stopped. Notices disappeared. The property manager called me personally and apologized. She said there had been a misunderstanding. I said there wasn't. There had been discrimination. But Karen wasn't done. She never is. That weekend, she confronted me again, this time in front of other neighbors. She accused me of threatening the HOA. She said I was trying to get special treatment. She said if I didn't like the rules, I should move. And then she said something that made everyone freeze. She said, You don't even look disabled." That was the moment the room turned on her. One neighbor gasped. Another told her to stop talking. Someone else pulled out their phone. Karen realized too late that she'd crossed a line you can't uncross. I stayed calm. I always do. I told her she was no longer allowed to speak to me directly. I told her all communication would go through my attorney. And then I rolled away. Slowly. Deliberately. In full view of everyone. 2 days later, the HOA board sent another email. This one wasn't a threat. It was a retraction. They acknowledged that electric wheelchairs are permitted. They apologized for the confusion. They assured me no fines would be issued. Karen was furious. She started posting on the community forum. Long rants about fake disabilities and abuse of the system. The posts didn't stay up long. They were reported, screenshotted, removed. But the damage was done. People saw who she really was. And then something unexpected happened. The HOA announced a special meeting. Mandatory attendance, agenda not listed. Just a date and time. That's when I knew part 3 was going to be the end of this. Because when organizations call emergency meetings without details, it's usually because they're trying to put out a fire. And Karen, she was about to realize she wasn't the one holding the hose. The meeting room was packed in a way I'd never seen before. Folding chairs lined the walls. People stood in the back. Some neighbors who never showed up to anything were suddenly very interested. Karen was already there when I arrived, sitting front row, arms crossed, jaw tight, staring straight ahead like she was daring someone to challenge her. She didn't look at me, but I could feel the tension coming off her like heat. The HOA president called the meeting to order, and right away his voice gave it away. This wasn't routine. This wasn't about landscaping or parking violations. This was damage control. He started by saying the board had received legal correspondence regarding recent actions taken against a resident. No names yet. Just enough to make the room quiet. Then he said something that made Karen's head snap up. He said the HOA had been advised by counsel that they were in violation of federal disability law. You could feel the air change. He explained carefully that electric wheelchairs and other mobility devices are protected, that the HOA had no authority to restrict them, that prior notices, warnings, and threats of fines were improper, and that the board was issuing a formal apology to the affected resident. That's when he looked straight at me. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The room turned. Neighbors whispered. A couple people nodded at me. Karen looked like she'd been slapped. But it wasn't over. The president went on. He said the board had also reviewed reports of harassment, false police calls, and repeated confrontation. He said those actions exposed the HOA to serious legal risk. And then he said the words Karen never thought she'd hear. He said the board was considering disciplinary action against a member for conduct unbecoming and harmful to the community. Karen stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly across the floor. She started talking before anyone recognized her. She said she was just enforcing the rules. She said she was protecting property values. She said she was being attacked for having standards. The president raised his hand and asked her to sit down. She didn't. That's when the board's attorney spoke up. Calm. Direct. He said the police report showed no violation on my part. He said the recorded video showed aggressive behavior. He said public statements questioning someone's disability could be considered discriminatory harassment. Karen tried to interrupt again. The attorney looked at her and said, "Ma'am, I strongly recommend you stop speaking." Silence. For the first time since I'd met her, Karen looked unsure. The board voted that night. Not on fines, not on rules, on her. They issued a formal censure. She was removed from all committee positions, banned from representing the HOA in any capacity, and warned that any further harassment would result in personal legal consequences, not HOA-backed ones. She stormed out before the meeting ended. Afterward, neighbors came up to me one by one. Some apologized. Some thanked me. A few admitted they'd been afraid of her for years. One older man said she needed this. The next morning, something else happened. A letter showed up at my door. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from the attorney. It confirmed everything in writing. No restrictions. No fines. Full acknowledgement of my rights. It also included a statement that the HOA would be updating its rules to explicitly protect mobility devices. Karen never confronted me again. She avoided me, crossed the street when she saw me, stopped posting online. Within a few months, her house went up for sale. No dramatic goodbye, no apology, just gone. The neighborhood changed after that. People were friendly, meetings were calmer, and the HOA, much quieter. I still roll down that same sidewalk every morning, same coffee, same sun coming up. Only difference now is no one questions whether I belong there. And that's the thing Karen never understood. This was never about a wheelchair. It was about power. And the moment she tried to take rights she didn't have, she lost everything she thought she controlled. Stories like this are exactly why we share them on Karen Stories Daily. Not just for the drama, but because sometimes standing your ground quietly does more damage to entitlement than yelling ever could. If you've ever dealt with an HOA or a Karen who thought rules didn't apply to them, drop a comment and tell your story. I read them. We all do. And if you think someone else needs to hear this one, share it with them. And yeah, if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe. Because trust me, this wasn't the last time someone tried to call the police and ended up calling attention to themselves instead.